2. Emmanora. Emmanora unbuckled her belt, pulled down her black leather trousers, squatted over the corpse of Baron Thomas Eckert, and pissed into his bleeding open mouth. Baron Thomas had been an easy mark. He was fat and stupid, and he had hired a troop of guards from the dumb cunt farm in the hills of Fuckface. She spat on him as she finished refastening her belt. The good thing about dumb cunt guards was she didn't have to fight anyone. She didn't do confrontation well, and she only took jobs where this would be at a minimum. She pulled Heartnail, her razor-edged rapier, from where she had driven it to the hilt up into the Baron's taint and wiped the blade across his leopard fur overcoat. She removed the 4 gold necklaces he wore and went through his pockets. She found 6 silver triads altogether, not a great haul from his body. She knew that he kept a key in his bedside table that opened a safe hidden inside his wardrobe. When she had finished looting what she could carry, she left Baron Thomas Eckert's estate laden with 8 bags of gold, silver, and ornate pieces of jewelry tied to the saddle of her dwarf camel Ruby. He was only 5 feet high at his hump, which was a perfect fit for her 4-foot milge physique. She estimated the sum of it to be worth about 20,000 gold. Not bad. One of the biggest hauls yet. She pulled out a pinch of moon moth from her belt pouch and pressed it into her finger-bone pipe. She rode along through the grasslands of the silver plains towards her secluded treehouse. She'd built it within the branches of a redwood. She smoked her pipe and let the soothing tingles of the moon moth envelop her from head to toe. She always enjoyed a bowl of moon moth powder after a long day of work. It helped her get through the nerve-wracking task of finding yet more space for the spoils she kept locked in her cellar. Emmanora finished off the last puff of her pipe and shoved it back into her pouch with her moonmouth powder. She slipped off her black headscarf and shook out her puffy red milled hair. It grew straight up from her cranium and stood stiff in the cool breeze rolling through the tall switchgrass. By the time Ruby brought her home, she had nodded off on his back. When he stopped by the camouflage trap door of her cellar, she fell from her saddle and face planted in the dirt, startling her awake. Luckily, the moon moth had kept her numb, and she didn't feel much pain, but it scared her a little, and that pissed her off. "Fuck!" she yelped, and jumped to her feet. She scowled at Ruby, who was sniffing at her and still chewing a bit of grass he had torn up a few feet back. "Why didn't you wake me? You know the deal. You're supposed to sit down when I'm asleep and roar, remember?" She caressed his face, and he turned his head and gurgled. Emmanora smiled and shook her head. "A bit late, pal, but I guess you get points for effort." She unhitched her loot bags from his saddle. "We're lucky no one robbed us after I nodded off, or followed us." She paused and scanned the surrounding landscape. Except for the huge redwood tree, there was nothing but an ocean of switchgrass surrounding her for a mile in all directions. She saw nothing unusual, nothing that was taller than the tall grass spanning the stretch of land all around her. Shoulder high to a milge meant waist high to most other humans, so it was unlikely anyone was crawling for a mile on their belly to rob her. She shrugged. She knelt beside the hidden door on the ground beneath a nondescript cap of sod she had used to hide the door from travelers wandering off the main road. It was a good 6 miles from the redwood and her cellar below it. She dialed through the puzzle sequence with her finger poked into the track lock she devised years ago from chiseled stones. 9 different track tracings released the lock. She flipped over the circular stone door and began dragging the bags of coin and jewels over to drop them down into the cellar. After she had tossed all 8 in, she shoved off the edge of the hole into the cellar, landing ass first on top of the 8 bags of loot. She laid back in satisfaction with her hands behind her head for a couple of minutes before fishing for the flint and steel packet on her belt. She used it to light the oil lamp she always kept down here. The entire room glittered and sparkled in the firelight. She savored the scent of turned earth that lingered. Over a decade of hoarded coins and valuable jewelry filled wooden shelving she had carved herself on 2 sides of the narrow cave. She had dug out the cave between 2 huge redwood roots. All her coins stacked in perfect denominations and nice even towers of perfect incremental values of 5. "Hey," Emmanora fumed. "What do you think you're doing, little bugger?" She reached out and snatched a ground beetle that was crawling up the side of a stack of gold bull coins and misaligning them as it did. She tossed it, legs kicking, up and out the entrance hole. At that moment, she heard Ruby cry out above, a long, steady gurgle. This usually signaled alert. Something troubled them up there. Emmanora put the lamp down on the floor and went for the ladder which she always let fall back into the crevice fork of the two roots when she exited the cellar. She propped it up on the entrance hole and quickly climbed up to have a look. When she emerged, Ruby was standing. Nothing seemed amiss in the immediate vicinity. She stood up and scanned across the grass all around. She patted Ruby and said, "What's going on? Are you well? Be still for a minute." She mounted his saddle and stood up on his back to get a better look at the perimeter. I don't see anything peculiar. She hopped back down and dismounted. You still hungry? Thirsty? I meant to go to the stream later and fetch us a bucket. She started rummaging through his saddlebags until she pulled out a water skin. This should do until then. She popped the cork and tipped it into his mouth. He did drink it, twisting out his tongue and spilling a good amount out the side of his sagging lips. She caressed his neck to reassure him. A pebble bounced across her view into the clearing around her redwood and came to rest at her feet. It looked like a polished oval of black onyx. She glanced down at it before corking the water skin and pinching up the pebble between her finger and thumb to investigate it further. It was polished onyx, and it was hers. It came from her stone collection she kept under her bed in a small wooden box. She only kept her favorite shiny things there. She looked straight up, and realization came over her. She ran towards the redwood and did a flying leap for the lowest branch, flipping and vaulting her way up to the treehouse hidden far above. She made sure to use her most delicate acrobatics to ensure the silence of her approach. When she pulled herself up and somersaulted into her loft, she came up in a kneeling stance with Hartnell poised. "Oh, about time you showed up, Shorty. I was beginning to think you'd lost your edge for perception," said Leobe Sarah Hall, Emmanora's sister. Leobe stood a foot taller than Emmanora and hadn't as much milge in her blood, leaving her with more platinum blonde and fewer freckles. "I've come here to kill you. I hope you've at least learned how to fight. I've been dreading this would be boring as ever for my entire trek to Voth. At least make it more entertaining than I expect. Nice place, by the way. Good hideout. I almost never found it, but you were always good at hiding like a rat." With the last, she released a dagger in a blur from her golden ring fingers that sunk into Emmanora above the collarbone. A burning blossomed in Emmanora's chest. "That knife wound would hardly be a hindrance to a real assassin." "You killed mother and father, you cunt," was all Emmanora could say through tears of rage. She leaped through the air with Hartnell recoiled for a downward heart skewer from the space just above the ribcage and below Leobe's neck. Leobe collapsed backwards into a roll, dodging, and Emmanora's rapier sunk between two boards in the hardwood floor. Leobe hooked the back of her hammer onto Emmanora's sword as she came up from her roll and bent the blade and pommel free of Emmanora's grasp. She pulled it from the floor for herself. "I did not kill them, though they deserve to die all the same for what they did to us. They were monsters. I provided them with another bad decision, one they would have made on their own had they came across it without my help." She taunted Emmanora with Hartnell, waving it around at her face. "Now I've got your stupid little pig sticker. Should I kill you with the weapon you use to murder fat, rich men who can't fight for themselves?" Leobe smirked. Her face glistened with golden septum piercings and eyebrow rings. A tattoo of a sun bursting with spears covered the left side, a mark of her pirate affiliation. She tossed Emmanora's sword out the window behind her and said, "Come join us, sister. You might learn something from the Pirate King. Edvard loves the smaller girls. He might make a real warrior out of you." Leobe patted her silver hammer. "Or I can follow through with my mission to eradicate all competitor rogue lords and renegades in the East Realm. I am merciful, you see." Emmanora felt blood streaming down between her breasts beneath her leathers. It made a tapping sound as it fell to the boards on her floor. "I am not." She charged Leobe. She wanted to claw her pretty eyes from their sockets. A fury beyond rational thought overwhelmed her. The window behind Leobe stood at least 50 feet from the ground. She didn't care if they both tumbled out. On the way down, she would pull the dagger from her shoulder and repeatedly stab Leobe until they hit the ground and met both of their deaths. Emmanora's hands met Leobe's throat within the arc of a lunging jump. The force of the blow knocked Leobe back, and both went tumbling out the window. Emmanora found herself swimming in midair, kicking and grasping for purchase. As she flipped over and felt her head dip back towards the earth, she caught sight of Leobe above, hanging from the ledge of her window. Leobe climbed back inside. "Cunt," Emmanora whispered. She conceded failure before she hit the ground, and everything blackened around her.